Let's blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. We are back for another installment of Let's Blow This Up. I'm your host, Jason Sircone, and tonight we're going to talk about using podcasting in the business world, of course, also in the investment side of things. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this. This isn't subject matter that we have covered here on the show. So if you are brand new and fresh to Let's Blow This Up, all kinds of new things coming your way tonight. If you are a veteran to the show, at least to the live stream portion, please join us. Let us know you're here out there in the Bomb Squad. Drop comments, drop questions. My guests and I would love to hear what you have to say. Without further ado, for tonight's episode, I would like to welcome to the stage Mr. Deacon Hoover. Ian, welcome to Let's Blow This Up, my friend.
Thanks, Jason. That was awesome. That whole intro and everything. It's pretty badass, man. I gotta say.
I appreciate that, my friend. It's been a very high compliment that's come that way, and makes me wonder, as we're approaching the end of season 2 and going into season 3, I thought maybe a change would be in order, but people seem to be digging it, so I might have to leave the intro in place as is.
Maybe you should switch from a bomb to a nuke.
Ooh, well, I guess I would tell the story of the world a little bit more, but
yeah,
we'll see where things go. But Ian, I'm glad you could take the time to join me tonight. For those that don't know, Ian is a real estate investor here in the great city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where yours truly is also located. He's done a lot in that space, and he's also leveraged podcasting to grow his network and to push his authority out to the world. So, Ian, we love to hear stories here on Let's Blow This Up. So tell us yours. What took you down the career path that you're on? How have things gone on that journey? And how has podcasting played a role in what you've done?
Oh, man, I guess it depends on how far you want to go back. When I was 18-ish, my brother, one of the few good things he actually did for me in my life was he was like, you got to read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's by Robert Kiyosaki. I read that, and my mind was pretty much blown because I grew up pretty poor. We didn't really know what wealth was or creating wealth, let alone thought it was a possibility for us. And then you read that book and you're like, I think it sounds like anybody can do this. And then fast forward a couple of years after that, when I was 19, I bought my first investment property. It was just a single family house. I was going to live in, flip it. And then I kind of fell in love with it and decided I kind of like this house and I'm going to keep it. So it's been probably my best rental property, and I had no clue what I was doing back then. And then I got fired one day from my corporate job at T-Mobile, and I decided I'm just going to go full-time into real estate, between selling, investing, and then eventually open up my own company. We've got about 60 agents strong now, and we're the largest local independent brokerage in Western Pennsylvania. And we're just really excited for the growth. But really, my passion is not in real estate. I like real estate because it's an avenue to print money, essentially. But I more enjoy getting out there, networking, talking to people, teaching. So that's why I've always been kind of attracted by having, a podcast or doing YouTubing and some of those things that are out there, being a content creator per se. So.
I think that's why we're going to have such a good conversation tonight, because in my opinion, and I've said this before here on the show, that podcasting is the greatest digital networking tool that we have at our disposal. There's so much you can do in regards to making connections and putting your voice out there that can not only connect you with your audience, but you never know who's listening. And just the right person in that audience could potentially get your podcast shared with the next layer and then the next group of people. And if things really start to build, the networking potential that comes from that is huge. But if you also boil it down to just the actual act of creating that content, here's you and me right here having this great conversation. That's networking at its best. You never know where this type of conversation can go, and the benefits that come from that, sky is the limit.
Yeah, and I really was just looking to get fully back into it, and I was actually It's weird how the world works, because then I get an email one day from somebody we both mutually know, and she's like,
Yep.
"Hey, you got to talk to him." And I was like, "Oh, I was actually just developing a plan to put my podcasting skills back to work." And sure enough, we met and had a really good meeting. And I showed you my studio that I built. Unfortunately, I'm not in that tonight, but I'm in my home studio that I'm still building out right now. But it's been a wild ride.
And I got to say, Bomb Squad, I was meeting with Ian in person. I got to see the studio, the office that's attached to it with the pool table / ping pong table, the collection of bourbon. My kind of place to record. And I was going to really push hard that day. If you weren't already in the mindset of got to get back into podcasting, I wanted to say, this is the place to do it. You've got the environment to create a killer podcast. You got to roll on this, man.
We're going to get back into it hard. And I want to do not only just business podcasts, but I want to do some personal stuff too. I have some passions on the personal side of things that I'm really into. And so I really want to get back into doing it all, and maybe even having multiple shows, which I believe you have multiple shows as well, correct?
I do. And that's funny you bring that up, because this is something that's going to get revealed here in the next few weeks. This was completely by accident. Let's Blow This Up, when I originally put the concept of this show together, was never meant to be about podcasting. But as the conversations have unfolded and the people that wanted to be a part of it, what I was discovering was that most people were already leveraging podcasting, or they wanted to make it a major part of their branding efforts. So the conversation just trended in that direction. Well, then all of a sudden I was sitting there one day and said, I've got 2 podcasts about the same thing. What's happening here? So between Let's Blow This Up and Podcast Theory, I'm talking a lot about podcasting as a whole. So what I've decided to do was combine the 2 shows, and this is something that won't happen until 2025, but Podcast Theory will be retired and everything will be done here on Let's Blow This Up. And hang out until the season finale on November 6th. That's where I'm going to reveal what this show is going to look like when season 3 debuts. But having multiple shows, it can be an incredible rewarding experience, but it's more work. And I don't recommend it to anybody that's just getting started with podcasting. And even if you are going to go the multiple show route, have people to help. Don't try to do it all yourself. It's a lot to take on. And that's, I actually, Jay Franzi, a good friend of mine who will be joining me on the season finale to talk about this, he had the same thing. He said he was doing 2 shows and realized that he was talking about the same thing on both shows. Why not just combine the 2? But I'll have some further announcements regarding that. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about when you're planning out your podcasting strategies, because in the world we live in now, people are incredibly intentional about how they're finding content. And if you have a show that's not dedicated to giving them exactly what they're looking for, it's harder to retain them as an audience member. And if your podcast is going in different directions, it might be better to think about doing one show about this subject and another about another. But don't spread yourself so thin that you can't keep up with either and you burn yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I had a show that was more of a personal, just fun, called Two Dads Drink, where a buddy of mine and I would get together and we would drink bourbon and we would talk sports. And then another one of our friends joined in season 3, I believe, and it was a lot of fun. We didn't have a ton of traction on it. It was just something we just did just to hang out. It was like our guys' night essentially, and it was a blast, with the exception of once we hit done, I was the only one doing the editing and the posting, and it was like having another full-time job. And it was just like, so when it came time to do season 4, I was just like, you know what, I can't do it unless we're gonna have capital. We're gonna invest in a team to do the background stuff. You know, it's just not gonna happen. So that's, and honestly, that's why you and I were talking, because I'm probably gonna look into working with Bombtrack to hopefully take some of the back end stuff off, so I can just do what I enjoy, which is the recording and the talking and the having fun, and then you guys can handle all the pain behind the scenes, because it's a lot. It really is. If you haven't done a podcast before, even just doing basic video editing, it can take hours. I mean, you know, just trimming and clipping and Now I know there's some AI tools and stuff out there that are coming around, but you still have to pay for those, I would assume. They're probably not free. So yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of energy that goes into it. So for me, just to do it for our guys' night, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, it's a skill set all onto its own. I feel that getting into podcasting, if you're going to do everything yourself, you're going to be wearing several different hats, and you're going to have to develop several different skills. And I speak from experience, because when I first started this, I didn't know anything about editing. I had never done audio editing other than the very minimal amount that I did back in college when I was in my communications program. And that was nothing like what the technology was today, and or even in 2015 when I first started podcasting. And I never really thought about it being this whole separate skill set until I sat down with a friend of mine who was showing me some of the basics. I reached out to him and just said, listen, I need some help here. And he showed me the ropes, and I realized there was much more to it than I was giving it credit for on the front end. I think a lot of people that think about podcasting, that's one of the things that throws them off and sometimes prevents them from even pressing the start button. They don't want to tackle that back end work. And this is why when I talk to everybody, I'm very transparent about what to expect. And this is why someone like myself and the business and the work that I do, it exists because people need help with this. And especially business owners, it has to be efficient. You only have X amount of hours in your day, in your week, in your month. And in that same time span, you also have a lot of other responsibilities that you have to keep your eye on in order for your business to function. So adding podcasting full time to that agenda, that's a heavy lift. But if you have someone on your side that can help you do some of that heavy lifting, it makes the process much easier. And then you can focus on the part of it that you enjoy the most. In your case, it's having those conversations and making those connections and putting good content into the world. If you can keep your focus on the one thing that you're meant to be doing, it makes everything else much, much easier.
Yeah, and I really believe that if I could probably pound out way more episodes if I just had somebody just doing the back end work. It's something I got to fit into the budget, and you get what you pay for. I mean, if you hire, I've gone through and hired editors online on like Fiverr, and it's like, this is pretty much the quality that I edit with. So like, why am I paying you to do it? You know?
Right. Well, and that's the thing too, especially with where we're at with content now. You can hire somebody for a relatively low cost and get relatively low work or low quality work. But today, everybody's attention spans are so much shorter. And I'm thinking back to when I first started, because our editing was slim to none in the very beginning. But I felt, at least looking back on it from 10 years of experience, I could say I felt like we were given a bit of a pass, because people did not care as much, because it was still, I don't want to say it was a new medium, but still podcasting was still very foreign, at least in regards to the content itself. Today, that's totally changed, and the listenership behind podcasts is growing by the day. And if people stumble upon your show and the quality is shit, they're out. They're going to move on to something else. So you spoke to that investment. If you're not willing to put the time investment in it to do it yourself, you absolutely have to bring somebody on that can get you in a position where your content stands out and your content grabs somebody's attention. It flows. It's not filled with background noise and lawnmowers outside and air conditioners starting and all these things that can make the overall quality of your show diminish and make people say, what are they doing here? Now, not everybody has the in-home studio or anything like that, but at the same time, there's still ways to approach doing this in a much more efficient and a much smarter way. So your audio is clean, your video is clean, and when people find it, they want to consume it. So 100%, this is where your mind has to be. It's all about that good quality content that makes a person want to grab hold of it and stay invested in it, so they not only absorb it themselves, but then feel compelled to tell others to listen as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I got to up my game on is my backdrop in my home office. Yours is pretty sweet there. You got the lights going on. And for those of you that are just listening, it's Jason's hooked up at home. So do you always record at home, or do you have a other studio somewhere else?
Actually, I do most of my recording here at home, at least as of now. But going into the new year, I met this guy that has a pool table and a bourbon collection. Maybe he'll let me use this. That was what
You
we'll
can use
talk.
my studio
You're
anytime.
right. But I also made a connection with a gentleman named Seth Whitted, and he's opening a place in Beaver Falls called the Content House. And we actually did the recording and filming for one of my new clients' podcasts for Burkich Design Group. We did their first season at the Content House. And this space is excellent because it's fully customizable. You can set it up in any way you want so you can get that aesthetic feel with the background. We did a couple different setups for Cassie's show. And for listeners of Let's Blow This Up, you might remember Cassie from season 1 of this podcast, but she'll have her new show going live in the very near future. So keep your eyes open for that. But I feel that having something in the background is good. Now, this is something that I want to put out there as a disclaimer / PSA to everyone. Do not let this slow you down from getting started. The background can be much like the equipment barrier that people put up. Well, I can't start podcasting until I have thousands of dollars to get the best camera and the best microphone and yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. And a lot of times, well, I'm just never going to get to that quality, so I can't start. The reality is, I don't give a damn what's behind you. It could be completely blank. It's all about your message. That's what people are really going to pay attention to. Now, the aesthetics are great. Don't get me wrong. And having a nice setup is a beautiful thing. But you don't have to be there on day one. You can start with a powerful message and good content that people will feel the impact of if you're putting it out in a positive, impactful fashion. Build up on the background as you go. As you get into the process of building a podcast, you might discover you're loving every second of it. And now is the time to invest a little bit more money into a microphone, more lighting, all that good stuff. But Ian, I don't know if you're aware, there are many podcasters out there. This is something that's always funny to me, but they literally sit in their closet and they record their content because that's the best sound you could possibly get. That's like being in a studio. And to really put that into perspective, they're not investing anything in that. They're just stacking their clothes up in a way that's going to absorb any type of unnecessary sound. It's going to make their voice really pop. And that's how they're starting out. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And honestly, if I look back at my original video, so my first show was called the Realtor Nation podcast, where I just brought in other real estate professionals and interviewed them. Mm-hmm. And mostly it was, I think originally the goal was, let's just get our brand out there because we were creating a new brand in the marketplace. But then when we started building on it, I was like, man, I'm getting a lot of little nuggets from each show that I can add to our business and make our business better. Not to mention the fact that I was actually going back and re-listening to every single episode, which I think is really, really important when you're early and you're getting started. And I still do that to these days. And I told you, like the one I did 2 weeks ago, I went back and I was like, why did I say so many times? You know, because I just try and get back on track. I'd say, let's get back on track. And so it's just something I almost did it right there. I'm like, I got to get that out of my routine and out of my rhythm. And a lot of people, when they first start, they say a lot, and they, they'll stumble over their words a lot. And it's just one of those things that doing those early shows, even if you don't have the proper equipment, is really important for sharpening your skills so that when you do get the right equipment, now you're ready to rock and roll.
Yep. And it's important to remember, too, in the beginning, as you're developing that skill set, you're getting comfortable with creating the content, there's going to be some flubs. And like you said, Ian, there's probably some filler words that you're using that you're not even aware of. And you have to learn to remove those from your vocabulary. But it's nice to be in an environment where there really aren't a lot of people listening so you can work out those bugs. But a lot of people walk away a few episodes in because the whole world didn't show up to listen, but don't put it on themselves and say, well, maybe in those first few episodes, I just really wasn't that captivating. Or this is literally the beginning of my journey. I should be using this time to improve my skills and get really good at what I'm doing. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form tooting my own horn here and saying that I'm really, really good at this. But I will say that in 10 years' time, I've gotten better. I'm way better today than I was back in January of 2015 when I did my first episode. And I remember listening to that saying, okay, if you really want to lean into this and do something with it, you're going to have to focus on getting better at it. And from that point on to this very moment, it's focusing on the fundamentals, active listening, communicating as clearly as possible, taking pauses instead of using filler words. These are things that are constantly front of mind for me, but it's taken this long to get to a point where I feel like it's almost second nature. So don't let those things discourage you, but also listen to your content so you can discover what might be throwing you off or what might not be necessary, and then you can make improvements as you go.
Absolutely. And if you're like me, I'm a fast talker. And the one thing I realized when I started using Spotify, for instance, is I like to speed up my podcast because then I can listen to more content in my short commutes or whatever. And when I'm talking fast, it sounds like somebody's shooting a machine gun or something, and it's hard to keep up with, right? So I have to like slow myself down in case somebody is listening at like 1.5 speed, or those are things you have to think about. Is if you're a fast talker, you might be talking too fast, especially if somebody's speeding it up. So it's really cool to kind of go back and listen to your old content and see where you've come. And it's important to continue listening to your existing content as well and try and get better at every aspect that you do, because you don't want to lose that one person that tunes in and says, oh, I'm going to check out this new podcast. And they're like, he talks too fast, or he says, this, and it drives me. Because now that I know the thing, I intentionally now listen to it, and it's like it drives me crazy. If somebody says too much, I'm going to probably end up tuning out, even if it is really good content, which is sad because there's a lot of great people out there that are using those filler words and might drive somebody crazy.
I had made that comment to my dad, who had watched or listened. I can't remember which way he did. I think it was watched one of the episodes. And I told him how much editing I was going to have to do on one of them. And he didn't even realize what it was. He said, well, on what? And I told him, he said, wow, I didn't even realize that. And that's the thing. If the trained ear hears it, we pick it up immediately. But to the casual listener, they may gloss right over. And that's where I think the argument comes up that I've had with many people about removing those words from the conversation and from the recording as a whole. I feel if it's low-hanging fruit and someone says something like this, and then instead of letting it be silent, they go, and then that could easily be removed and no one would ever know it was there. But there are people that I've had conversations with that say that takes away from the authenticity of the conversation. And I disagree 100%. I feel that's just laziness on the editing side of things, because you want to create the best listener experience possible. So removing those filler words makes for a much cleaner production. And if it's easy to do, you should do it. If it runs into the next sentence to where it makes this clipping sound, or it's harder for it to be removed altogether, then you leave that, because you, again, don't want to damage the overall listener experience. But overall, I feel that listening back to your own content not only allows you to pick up on those little vocal cues that you weren't even aware of, but you had made mention to it, Ian, all of the guests that you had welcomed onto your show, you were learning from them each and every time, and you were picking up new nuggets that you could implement in your own business. That's huge. And if you don't think about the learning experience that you're getting on your own from the podcast you're producing, you're really looking at it with a short-sighted lens, because I've said it 100 times. If I get one person to listen to my podcast and it was me, but I'm walking away with all this knowledge from the guests that joined me for this conversation, that's a win. And I'll let the downloads happen as they may. But for now, I'm learning, and I'm building a relationship with somebody. That's powerful. And especially when you think of the networking side of things, that cannot be overlooked.
Do people still download podcasts?
That's a great question too. And I know I don't. I know I am deliberate with content. And a lot of it is either driven by what I might see a clip of on social media, or what I feel like listening to that day. So I'll go to the search engine, or I'll go to the Apple Podcast app, and I will search for real estate investing, and whatever pops up in the feed that's got relevant current content, that's what I'm going to tune into. That's a good comment, though. I'm not sure how many people do that. I know for me, it was because of storage on my phone.
Yeah.
I had like 50 gigs of podcast content backlogged. I was like, I'm never going to get to all this. This is insanity.
Well, back when we used to have limited data requirements with our cell phone carriers, then we're like, oh, we got to download it so that we can listen to it while we're on the go and not use our data. But now it's like everybody has unlimited data. I think the only reason to actually download a podcast anymore would be for like if you're going to go on an airplane or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think from a downloading perspective, I typically do download them and it's because I don't have unlimited data, because I'm usually, I don't pay the extra because I'm never in a scenario where I'm running out of it. I'm around Wi-Fi so much that I never run out of the 4 gigs that I get. It very rarely, I shouldn't say never, but nevertheless, the point I'm making is if I find the podcast that I want to listen to and I know I'm going to listen to it in the car, I'll download it to listen to that episode. But then after it's done, I delete it. But that's one of the big, what do I want to call this? This is one of the big flaws when it comes to the download metric, is if you're subscribed to a podcast and say you're subscribed to Let's Blow This Up, every time I release new content, it's going to automatically filter to your device and it's going to credit me with a download. Super. I've got my download metric up by 1, but that doesn't mean you listen to the show. Like I said, how many gigs of content did I have backlogged that I just never got around to listening to? And that's the most important part. So I feel it's much more important to position your content to be found for somebody that's intentionally looking for that specific type of content, and let the downloads filter in that way, than just have this manufactured, well, I've got 100 subscribers, so 100 downloads automatically come to me. If only a small percentage of that list listens to your show, what's the point? Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, the platform that I use, they don't actually have download statistics anymore. They just have listens. So it actually tells you how many people listen to your podcast, which is kind of cool. It's nice to know how many people are actually listening. I wish you had dug in deeper and told you how long they listen for, because that's super important. You gotta hold on to that listener, you know?
That to me is the most important overlooked metric that we have. And I feel like that should be the one that's featured more than downloads or listens, because that's going to teach you a lot about what you're doing, and it can help in so many ways. The big example, think about it, if you do a podcast that's an hour long and people are bailing out after half an hour, that tells you maybe shooting for 30 to 40 minutes is the better range, and it's going to keep people more captivated in the whole episode. Yeah, that's the one that I've been a very big proponent of metrics killing the dreams of brand new podcasters, because you log in and it's right there. It's the first number you see staring you in the face, the downloads. And if you've got this preconceived notion of what this show is going to achieve from a numbers perspective, and then the number you see in front of you falls short of that, you're going to think you're failing. And then you're going to get all thrown out of whack and probably give up on your show well before you get to any significant breakthrough, but unwittingly realizing or not realizing that you were making breakthroughs. It just wasn't something you could grab hold of just yet. Because if you're taking the time to put this content into the world, you're doing something special. It just takes time for the right audience to find it. So letting metrics throw you off your game, it sucks. Don't let it happen.
When I was listening to Let's Blow This Up, which is a great podcast, by the way, and I was really impressed by your radio voice. It's way better than mine. I was super shocked when you at every episode I listened to, pretty much you drop the, most podcasters, 90% of podcasters don't make it to the 3rd episode or whatever, and it's like, holy cow. And it's funny because I use similar statistics when I'm like recruiting and talking to potential agents. It's like, 90% of agents don't make it to the 5-year mark, and it's like, you did all that work and you're not even going to stick with it for 3 episodes. Like, what? I mean, you're not even close to ready at the end of 3 episodes, unless you're just an uber talented person.
No, I think that even in that to me, it's not even the skill hasn't even been tapped into yet at 3 episodes, not even close. And honestly, I feel that it's going to take closer to 3 digits before you truly find that voice, that level of comfort that's going to allow you to have these conversations in a very relaxed fashion. Or if you're creating solo content, to talk to the camera and talk into the microphone as if someone else is in the room with you. It takes a minute to get there. And that's why a lot of podcasts, they really start to experience higher levels of success when they break 100 episodes. And a lot of that is it's the trial period, of course, but in that, you're still creating valuable content. And if you evaluate it as the journey versus the to get to this destination that's really arbitrary when you think about it, you're going to learn so much, but you're going to get to experience so much along the way, because the relationships that you start to build, the connections that you start to make, all it really takes is for one person to reach out to you that listened to your podcast and tell you how impactful it was for them. At least that's how I see it. I know that was a turning point for me. I had, back in the day, first podcast, when I had one person tell me how much they liked it. It just lit me up inside and made me realize I was doing something right.
And
you'll
you
never
tune out
experience
the
it.
haters too.
Well, you're gonna. Well,
Yeah, you got to tune out the haters. And the sad thing is the biggest haters are typically the closest people to you. They're gonna be like, you're not gonna do that. You can't do that. It's so hard to do that. They're gonna give you all the excuses, and then you're gonna have that in the back of your head. You got to tune those people out.
I'll tell you what. If it weren't for haters, I may not be where I am today, because it was a troll that led me into podcasting for the first time, because I wanted to try to prove that I could do it better than him. And I've told that story many times here on the show. And I absolutely did not. When I first got into it, I had this chip on my shoulder because I had radio experience and that this guy was an ass and I was going to prove him all wrong in every possible facet and juncture. I did my first podcast and realized immediately this is way harder than I thought. I love it, but I need to do a lot more if I'm ever going to do better than that guy. And that, eventually that whole thing faded away, and I never used it as a metric or gauge of success ever again. I just in a lot of ways, thanked him for driving me to the medium that's the biggest part of my life that any career has ever had for me in my lifetime. So,
have you ever had him on your podcast?
I had never talked to him physically in person. This was all through Twitter. This is way back in the day. Honestly, the funniest thing was I ran into his co-host one time at a brewery. This was back in the beer world where we all existed at the time. And him and I had a great laugh about it because it was old school by then. It was a few years old by that point. He made a comment. I just laughed. I was like, whatever, man. And I was like, I probably owe him a thank you and a 6-pack because here I am. I'm loving podcasting, and I like to think I probably would have landed here anyway because me and my friend had been kicking around ideas to do a show, but that was the catalyst. It really was. It's silly. And I tell everybody, if you're going to start a podcast, I say it tongue in cheek because I don't think anybody else is thinking this way, but I say, don't start it out of spite because it's not the best foundation to grow on. But like I said, I don't think a lot of other people are thinking that way. If they are, don't do it. Do it for a better reason.
Whatever motivation you need, man. Like, I've had multiple motivations in my life. Getting fired was a motivation. It was like I'm going to show them they made a mistake, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to go build this career up. When I was writing a book, I made a lot of mistakes, and I didn't put it out there for a long time because I was afraid of what people would think of me. There's all kinds of different things that, you can put a chip on your shoulder, and that's all you need. And when I started my company, my real estate brokerage, the broker I was working for, when I told him I was leaving to start my own company, he told me that I was a dime a dozen and I would realize it. And I went home and I wrote that down and I stuck it up on my wall, and I have it right up here in my home office. It says, guys like you are a dime a dozen. And I look at it every day, and that's some of the motivation I have to go out and do what I do every day and show him that, hey, I'm not quite a dime a dozen. I might not be as successful as he is, but I'm not a dime a dozen. I built a pretty successful company, and hopefully I would love it someday if he, was the guy who either acquired me or I acquired him, because that would be real entertaining. As soon as that paperwork was signed, I'm going to have a little shot back out of me.
There's a big lesson to be learned in that. I have a similar story with I'm getting fired from a job that I finally said, you know what, it's time to go all in on yourself. And it hasn't been the easiest path to walk, believe me, but I knew I was, even if it was just proving it to myself, I was going to keep pounding that rock until it broke. And here we are. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, it takes a level of perseverance that I don't think a lot of people are willing to put forth. But if you are, there's magic to be discovered. And like you said, Ian, haters are going to be a part of your life no matter what. And the more popular you get creating content and building your presence, the more those haters are going to be in your face. And there's going to be more and more of them. It's just the price you pay for reaching a certain level of visibility. But if you can, A, filter out the bullshit, because a lot of it is just that, but B, find some hidden messages and hidden gems within that hatred that you can utilize, whether it fuels your passion, fuels your desire, or actually has some relevance to it that you can implement it in your practices. Man, like, thank you for helping me, dude. I know you're trying to be a dick, but you motivated me in a way that no one else could. So for that, my hat is off to you. That'll piss them off even more. And that is beautiful.
Well, and honestly, if you can read past the hate, if it's reading or listening, whatever it is, you go past the hate and then you just really look at the context that's there. They're probably giving you some sort of constructive criticism that you could probably implement and make your product better, right? So like, why not listen to it? And don't take it offensively. It's just people. I would say everybody on the internet has big, gigantic internet balls,
Yeah.
and then you meet them in real life and they just are not the same whatsoever. And it's like,
right.
they're just there. They got their keyboard. But if they took the time out of their day to give you some kind of feedback, even if it's not what you want to hear, there's probably a reason for it. So you might as well listen and implement a change in your business and hopefully make some positive out of such a negative thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times that hatred comes from a place of love. I think you said that pretty much in what you were saying there. It's, again, we get so fixated on 20 comments come in, 19 were positive, 1 was negative, which is the one we look at the most. It's always the negative one. But in reality, there's going to be a lot more people cheering you on. They're just more silent. And it's one of those things that to this day, it's a head scratcher, but I do also get it. The fact that people will go so far to leave negative comments or share a negative experience, but to do the same about a positive experience, it's like pulling teeth. It's one of the reasons why I never ask for ratings and reviews on this podcast. If you want to go leave a rating and review, of course, I'm happy to read it and I'm happy to get the feedback, but I don't want to end every episode begging for that or asking for that, because I feel we live in a world where it's just not a thing that people put front of mind. And even if you ask for it, they're not going to do it, because so many more people are just more wired to go talk about the negative experience. And if it's good, they feel great. They might tell some people on the side, but making it public, it doesn't happen enough. I wish we lived in a world where we did have more people sharing those positive experiences, but since we don't, learn to accentuate the positives of a negative experience and use it to your advantage.
It's a beautiful thing. It really is. So, and I'm the same way. I look at the positive in everything, right? Like I'm one of those people that's so annoying because I'm always positive. Like the worst thing could possibly happen, and I'm like, well, here's the couple good things we got out of it. Let's move forward. It's like that's the best thing to do, right? Like move forward, stay positive, keep your head up, keep grinding, and do your thing.
Yeah. What do you possibly have to gain from dwelling on the negative? And this, you want to talk about transcending podcasting. I think that this applies to life as a whole. There's so many things that are going to happen in the ebb and flow of our lives. I sound like Mike Tomlin, but we are constantly going to experience those negatives. And to me, I just come to a point where I said, you know what, this is hard. You can't get around this, but the negatives make the positive experiences even better, because you feel this sense of accomplishment knowing what it felt like to not understand what that meant. I want to bring this up because we have to go off subject on this, because as I was getting ready for our show, I had asked some questions that you would fill out for me so I could learn more about you, and you shared something that I feel is something that is eradicating and eroding our society. It's this softening of children, and it's not setting them up to understand what a letdown is. Setting them up in these sporting events where they don't keep score, or everybody gets a trophy at the end. Not realizing that damage is going to carry into adulthood, to where they may lose a job, they may not get a job that they applied for, but they don't understand what it means to persevere and fight back from that. If you don't know what it means to lose, how the hell are you ever going to understand what is truly wrapped up in a win? Blows my mind that we've gotten to that point. And I cringe when I think about that, getting into the overall culture of this world as we move forward. It's a scary thought.
It is scary, and you and I are both raising children in this world. I'm just trying to raise my children the right way. And when I coach my kids' sports teams, I've coached soccer and basketball, and that's my first meeting with the team every time is, hey, look, I can't guarantee we're going to be the best team. What I can guarantee is we're going to be the most in shape team, because we're going to work out. We're going to actually put some work in here. So if you don't like running, there's the door. Feel free to quit, because we don't want quitters on our team anyways. And we're going to actually focus on winning and losing. I know it's not a popular thing nowadays, but we are, and we do. And I tell the parents that we're going to focus on winning and losing. And every time they lose, I tell them, this is what we did great. This is what we didn't do great. Every time we win, I do the same thing. And it's really positive to see the kids actually care about it, and if you don't emphasis on it, they don't care about it. And then they just go through life thinking it's okay to lose when it's just not,
Right.
And it creates a really soft culture. It really does. And I really am sad to see what the future looks like with the next generations. Because I think you and I were probably, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 37. I'm guessing you're probably right around my age. And I think we were the last generation that really just we got treated the right way, in my opinion, which is if you fail, get your ass back up and get back on that horse and try again. One of my favorite memories of my mom, which if you read my book, I dedicated my book to her, and she's been a huge impact in my life. She's got muscular dystrophy. And she had it since she was born, and she wasn't supposed to live to the age of 2, and then 11, and then here she is in her 60s now and still kicking. She's a warrior. Awesome. But she was a single mom, and she is all about women power and all this cool stuff and everything. So I got raised around that. And there was one time I was in the punt, pass, and kick contest. You remember what that was back in the day? I
do. Yes.
I was pretty good. I went to regionals a couple of times, and I went to regionals. This was the last year. I was 11 years old. This was the last year they let boys and girls compete together in the punt, pass, and kick contest. And I had a real strong throw, kick, and punt every year. At 11 years old, I could punt 60 yards, throw 50 yards. I was pretty talented there.
Nice.
But it was a straight line competition, so it was about accuracy too. If you throw and you're too far off the line, then they take yardage off. Well, I ended up losing by 6 inches to a girl.
Okay.
And it was an hour drive home, and my mom razzed me the entire way home. You lost to a girl. I can't believe this. That is hilarious. The whole thing. She just let me have it for the entire ride home. And all that did was motivate me more to go get better at the skill, right? And if you don't do that, if you're just oh, it's okay, honey, you tried, and there's always next year or whatever, and you don't kind of hold them accountable for well, you lost because of this, so why don't we go and practice harder and try more and do more. My mom didn't tell me to practice harder and try more, but her words told me that I needed to go practice harder and do it more and become more successful. And I think that, that's one of the memories that stuck with me. Yeah. Even though it wasn't a parent that I can't believe you lost, all pissed off at me, because we had a lot of that back when you and I were growing up.
Oh yeah.
She did it in a way that it it got me motivated, right? And that's what matters. And I really hope that there's more people, you and I, out there that are ingraining, success into our children, because they need to know that the world's when they hit 18, the world's going to hit them whether they like it or not, and they're going to have to get back up and get on that horse and go, or they're going to be one of those unfortunate children that just never amount to anything, and they're going to work at Dunkin' Donuts the rest of their life and play video games and pick their nose and do whatever. Hopefully not live in my basement. My God, please don't live in my basement. That's the last thing I want. Go to jail over live in my basement, please. At least you went out and did something, So I'm big on that. I really, my son, I literally beat the hell out of the kid. I mean, I wrestle with him. We pound on each other. We box each other. And I can guarantee he's one of the toughest 10-year-olds you'll ever meet. He's small. He's really small. He's probably one of the smallest kids in his grade, but he is tough as nails. He broke his collarbone wrestling and continued to wrestle for a minute and a half after he broke his collarbone.
Oh, wow.
He's just tough as nails. And it's like, that's what I want to raise in my children. I want them to face adversity head on and not worry about it. And it's important. It's important for the future of our world.
No, I agree. I applaud you for having taking that step with your own kids, with the kids you coach. I remember going to my daughter's first soccer game where they weren't keeping score, and I found out they don't keep score, and that just blew my mind. It was one of those things, like, I never thought I would have to have this type of conversation, because it seems so silly that, and really, when you think about it, at the end of the day, when you're at that age, it's all about the lessons that come with it. Yes, you want to excel and you want to be the best, but you also have to learn where your flaws are so you know what to work on so you can get better. Those are life lessons that carry over into adolescence and then through your teenage years into adulthood. If you're not understanding those core principles at a young age, the things that you're going to experience when you're an adult are going to suck, because the world will hand you some shitty hands sometimes. And understanding it, you can take those lessons from sports, you can take those lessons from schoolwork. Looking back, obviously schoolwork is important, but I learned more just from looking back on the messages that my teachers were saying about why the assignments were important to complete. Not so much that you're going to absorb and retain everything in the trigonometry book, but why was it important to meet deadlines and complete these assignments? Because this is what life is. These are the things that you're going to encounter when you get into the real world. It's not going to be, well, show up 10 minutes late and everything will be okay. It's like, no, you get your shit in on time. You get your stuff done the way you're supposed to, because that's the way the world functions. These are the lessons that if we take these away because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, it's only going to cripple them as they get later into life. And that's, I don't want to see that the world become that, but also as a person that will depend on that generation as an old timer, hopefully, if I get that far, I'm hoping I could have somebody competent that I could have a conversation with that isn't strapped to their cell phone or their smartphone so they have to text it out, because that's what we see. Man, we went down a path that
I do have one other funny story. So when I was coaching soccer for the first time, it was U6, so it's under 6 years old, right? So it's like 5 and 6 year olds, and I'm coaching my son's team. And after the game, I was like, yeah, we won, good job. And I'm like high-fiving all the kids and talking about winning and all this stuff. And the other coach came over to me. He's like, hey, we really don't talk about winning and losing, and all this stuff. And I was like, well, I do, and you just lost. So enjoy that. Have a good day. And I just walked away, right? And by the end of that season, we had a coaches chat. All the coaches were talking shit to each other, like, oh, hey, I'm 6-2 and you're 4-8 or whatever. And I just going back and forth. And I was like, wow, that culture changed real quick.
Well, and that's good. Well, okay, if you're not talking about that, what are you talking about?
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine
fun. That's what they were preaching. Oh, we got to have fun out there. It's like, no, we got to win games. If we can have fun while we're doing it, great.
I guess since when is playing the sport to win was fun to me when I was a kid. I played baseball, and organized. I played baseball, and then I got into golf. But me and my friends, we did everything: football, hockey, basketball, all these things that we just did on the playground or wherever the setting may be. I enjoyed playing all those sports. I played golf, I played tennis in high school, but I played to win. I enjoyed the act of playing, but the objective was not to just walk off the court getting my ass kicked going, oh, that was fun. No, it was to walk off saying that I played well, I did my best, I put my best effort forth, and I brought home a victory for our team. That's, oh man, I don't know. I don't know. That's like when I learned that my daughters, they weren't keeping score. I was like, so they're just basically just chasing a ball around a field. If that's fun, okay. It doesn't seem like much fun to me. I have more fun getting to celebrate the win at the end. I thought that's what sports was. And then to tie this back to what we're driving at here, I think that, or what we're talking about here, I think the point we're driving at is in business and podcasting and life as a whole, if you're not thinking about that big outcome and having fun and getting to that outcome, understanding that there's going to be trials and tribulations along the way, those are all learning experiences that just make you better. And the better you can become at what you're doing, the better the final product you produce is going to be. And that's what's going to grab somebody's attention and ultimately let them welcome you into their world. So now you are making an impact on their life.
If you quit before 3 episodes, you're probably soft.
You're very well, and it goes back to what you said several minutes ago at this point, because we went on this little rant. But if you quit after 3 episodes, and that's just, it's the number we'll use for conversation's sake. It could be any number, but the odds are that before you got to episode 3 and said, well, this isn't for me, you more than likely had all of the right mindset. You had these grand ideas, the strategy, whatever it was, that you knew what you wanted to do could potentially change the world. So you said, I'm doing this. We're going to make this podcast. This is going to be great. But what you probably didn't have in place was the long-term, we have to work our ass off to get to a point where this could actually be considered relevant to our target listener, because our target listener has other podcasts and other media to consume. So you have to think about the big picture and don't launch your podcast that soon. The world has been without you and your podcast for thousands of years. It can wait a few more months while you systematically plan out the first 12 to 15 episodes, so you put yourself in a good spot to launch your show, and then maintain consistency while you continue adding content to your bank. That's going to put you in a much better place, and we can eradicate that freaking statistic, because your launch itself will have more episodes than that 3 episode failure rate that we're seeing from so many podcasters.
Yeah, maybe you actually get a little bit of a sample size of what you're looking at, and you can. I do admit that, like, it can be frustrating when you put in a lot of work, and then you go to your dashboard and it says you got 12 listeners. And you're
sure,
like, that's it, But I did have a couple videos go viral on YouTube over the year. I had like 2, and by viral I mean like 10,000 views or whatever. But like,
did you plan it? Did you plan for that?
No, not at all. I mean,
exactly, because you can't plan for that.
Yeah, you can't plan for it. And I've tried to reproduce those results, and they don't happen, because whatever the algorithm is for YouTube, I haven't figured it out yet. But it's like one of those things where you want that instant gratification, but I didn't get anything out of the 10,000 followers, right? So you just got to keep building your presence and your brand, and eventually you'll sit back and you know what I kind of think of? I was like, you know what, the worst case scenario, when I'm long and gone, my kids, grandkids, great grandkids, they can go and listen to my content and be like, that's what my grandpa was like. I try and tell my son, he's named after my great grandfather, and I try and tell him what kind of a man he was and some of the jokes he would say and all that. Man, I wish there was a library of content that I could just go and show him. This was your grandfather, And so at the very least, I'm creating that where my family will be able to look at that stuff after I'm gone and be like, man, I miss that guy, or man, I wish I would have got to meet him, but he was a cool dude,
We've talked about legacy here on this podcast before, and it's an incredibly important factor of this. That it's a byproduct that we oftentimes don't think about. But as long as we're not taking this content down, it is written in ink on the internet, and for generations to come, they could experience this and learn so much. And your family is just, if you want to keep it in that circle, your family can listen to that content and learn so much about who you are, what you were passionate about, telling stories. These are all great things, but only 3 episodes of that, not so much. I feel the same way. I've said that my uncle and my grandfather, who have both passed, the fun we all used to have, if I could have captured some of that in a way that we could relive it today, it would just be one of the coolest things imaginable. But of course, we didn't think that way back then. But we live in a world now where that's a pretty powerful presence that you can leave for yourself, and that's going to outlive us physically. And as long as people are still feeling that impact, and there's power within those words, there's a lot to be gained from that. And you never know how that's going to impact the next generation and beyond.
Well, I'm sure you're trying to wrap this up, but today is the 15th anniversary of a good friend of mine passing away at the age of 26. And that was before social media was big and all that. And I can't even find many photos of us and him. And, so that's important. And just, if you can just at least have that in the back of your head, that like, hey, the people that do love and care about me will want this content someday. Even if they don't want it now, they're going to want this content someday, because they're going to want to relive who you were and what you did and all that. And the other thing is, like, when I finally get the printed copies of my book in and everything, it blew my son's mind. He's like, "You wrote a book? No, you didn't." He was like, I don't believe you. And then, like, I showed him the book and the cover, and he's just like, wow, like, he just couldn't believe it, right? Just to see that. So it's like, think about the other people in your life, and this is for them. And if you do that, then maybe you won't quit,
Yeah, no, that's great motivation. And like you said earlier, there's a number of ways that motivation can come your way. You have to find what resonates hardest with you, and whether it's legacy, whether it's somebody that you want to prove wrong. Like I said, be careful walking that line. But the ultimate thing that we're driving at here is with business for podcasting, or in any form of building your business, using podcasting to do that. Be very deliberate in how you're doing it, but understand that the process itself is where the magic lies, because you can walk away with so many valuable lessons and so many new skills that transcend what you're doing on a microphone, and will give you new ways of speaking to the people that you love, speaking to clients, speaking to colleagues. Your communication skills are going to go up, because without really even realizing it, you're flexing those muscles, those communication, those listening, those speaking muscles. And that just makes you a better overall communicator. And that's going to make you a better asset and resource in this world.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm looking forward to having you on my show, because I want to pick your brain. I thought about just flipping the script on you and just interviewing you today, but I didn't do it. I was like, nah, that'd be kind of wrong of me to take over his podcast. So I'm just going to have you on my show. I'm going to interview you and pick, because I really want to pick your brain.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing that for you, my friend. I'm more than happy to extol the virtues of podcasting to you and your audience, and feel free to pick away.
Let's do it. We can do it in person, and we'll have some bourbon, all right?
Oh, man, now you're speaking my language. I love it. Well, Ian, this has been a lot of fun, man. And as I said, I went down a couple paths that I wasn't expecting, but at the same time, I think it's all relevant to the overall topic at hand. But thank you for bringing your wisdom and insight to the show. And take a minute to share with the Bomb Squad where they can follow up with you if they want to learn more and maybe check out your book or tune into your podcast. It's going to be making a powerful comeback here in the near future.
Yeah, so pretty much everything, I'd rebranded a couple years ago. Just about everything is under Ian S. Hoover, and that's just my name and my middle initial, because I hate my middle name. And my book is called The Short-Term Memory Loss, which it actually is a sales book, not a memory loss book, but there's a reason for it. You got to kind of read a couple pages, and it'll figure it out. And it's available on Amazon. And then you can find me on social media at Ian S. Hoover. And then my podcast is the Ian S. Hoover Show, which is definitely going to make a huge comeback, although it's still all there and it's relevant, just not, I've done one episode in the past 12 months, probably.
Well, I'll leave the links in the show notes so everybody can get caught up on the archives, and then they'll be tuned in for when the new episodes, one of them featuring me, will go live.
Perfect.
So before we sign off, I got to ask, S, am I allowed to guess what the middle name might be? If I get it right, will you tell me?
If you got it right, I would tell you, but you're never going to get it right.
Never going to get it right? S.
Never going to get it right.
Oh, man, I'm trying to go real off the books here. Sylvester. That's probably too.
No.
All right.
You gotta go girly, brother. You gotta go girly. My mom was a hippie stoner, and she went with some girly. Actually, my whole entire name was band related, so they were lead singers of bands that she liked.
S, not Sydney.
No.
No. All right, now this
That's
could go
close
on.
though. You're not too far off. But
Yeah.
maybe someday you'll guess, or you get me drunk enough someday. Maybe I'll.
We'll spin that wheel when we got some bourbon in front of us. All right, Ian, this has been a blast, man. Thank you so much for being here, Bomb Squad. If you're watching, thank you for watching. If you're listening to the podcast, as always, thank you for listening. We do these shows live each and every Wednesday evening at 7:00 p.m. on my personal LinkedIn page, on YouTube, and on Facebook. That is the Bombtrack Media pages for both. Make sure you're following. Make sure you like those pages. And if you're on YouTube, click the bell so you know when we go live. Please don't be a dick about this. Next week, I will be joined by my good friend Megan Shields. Megan was a guest with her husband Matt earlier in the season. She's coming back, and we are going to dive deep into where social media marketing is going as we come up on a brand new year. What that means for you as a podcaster, what that means for you as a business owner, as a brand builder. Megan's got her shit together, and she knows what she's doing when it comes to paid advertising strategies on Facebook, Instagram, and beyond. She's bringing that insight back to the show, and I can't wait for that to happen. Until next week, and our paths cross again. My name is Jason Sircone. This has been Let's Blow This Up. On behalf of Ian Hoover, stay explosive. Have a great week. See you next time.